Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 534, and today's date is December 5th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Full-Time Jobs Disappear as the Economic Collapse Approaches. Let's get into the economic collapse. Now, we understand Europe is still having a problem. I mean, if we really look at this, and we look at what happened in 1927, 1928, 1929, we saw Europe completely falling apart. They were in a deep recession going into a depression. And then we looked at the United States and we saw the stock market at all-time new highs of about 400 or so points. And when we looked at the real economic indicators around the country at that point in time, we saw that people were losing jobs, businesses were going out of business, 10 cities were starting to pop up. But it really didn't matter because everyone looked at the stock market again at that time. And until the market came crashing down, then everyone said, hey, the economy fell apart. Well, the stock market is the last indicator to let you know, yes, we have reached the collapse. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing Europe right now falling apart. Country by country by country. It is a domino effect, and we're seeing that it's starting to affect Germany. The Deutsche Bundesbank said gross domestic product, which is GDP, in Germany is expected to grow at only 1% next year, half of what it predicted earlier for this year. Now, we have to remember, the start of this year, most of the economists and the central bank said, hey, this year looks fantastic, and they were back in 2013, like in a November, December time period, and they said, listen, 2014, we're going to see growth of between 2.5 and 3.0 GDP, and it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, that didn't happen, and of course, the central bankers like us, and they try to make us believe that things are a lot better than they are because they're trying to keep us in the illusion. But what we're seeing right now is they're continually revising all of their numbers. And they're saying that the rest of this year, the growth is only going to be about 1.4% in Germany instead of 1.9%. So it has dropped dramatically. And next year, it's going to be a lot worse because how all of a sudden is it going to be better? It can't be. It's impossible. And this is why they are continually trying to convince us that everything will be okay because they're trying to get this big event started here to cover up this major collapse that is coming. Now, out in Canada, we see the job market has been cooling off in November, shedding about 10,700 positions after 2 consecutive months of big gains. And what's very strange is you think that the job market would be getting better because we're coming into the holiday season right now, and more jobs or part-time jobs are being put into place, and more people will be employed, but we're really not seeing that for some reason. The unemployment rate edged up to about 6.6% from 6.5% in October. Analysts had expected an increase of about 5,000 jobs after 43,100 were created in October and 74,000 in September. The labor participation rate, which is particularly interest of the Bank of Canada, stayed at 66%, the lowest since November 2001. And we can see that people losing their jobs, the unemployment rate ticking up, is starting to happen all across the globe. Canada's seeing it, Australia's seeing it, Germany is seeing it. It might not be going up very quickly, but is ticking up very slowly. And once this thing starts to accelerate, you're going to see things just completely skyrocket. Look what happened in 2008, right before the stock market crashed. Unemployment was ticking up very slowly, and then all of a sudden, right after that, when the last indicator to let you know the economy failed, all of a sudden the unemployment just shot up. Companies laid off left and right. That was their excuse. The same thing is going to happen again. All of a sudden things are going to fall apart. And of course, it's going to be blamed on another organization or another country, and you're going to see unemployment skyrocket, not just here in the United States, but all over. All the private Western central bank countries are going to feel the effect. Now, out in France, we understand that unemployment there is horrific. We understand the youth unemployment is absolutely terrible. People cannot find jobs. And a town in France was forcing the homeless to wear yellow ID triangles. French authorities have now abandoned the homeless, requiring them to wear a yellow triangle card that identified their suspected illness. So you would be sitting there homeless, and you would have a little marker on you to let everyone know that, first of all, you're homeless, but they could tell that you are, or maybe you're just walking down the street and you're homeless and you had this little marker on you saying that, yes, here I am homeless and these are the diseases I have. Can you imagine walking around saying, I have herpes, I have AIDS, I have cancer, I have, diabetes? This is absolutely ridiculous. And right now, they were saying that the original intention of the initiative was to help the homeless and help the health workers when they pick them up, so they knew what they had so they can treat them. And this is absolutely ridiculous. This is what they always use. No. This is for your benefit, not for us. We're trying to help you. Well, guess what? Why doesn't everybody have that? Wouldn't that help everybody, where they can just look at your tag and see what illnesses you have? No, this was a marker to distinguish and who was homeless and who wasn't. But of course, this was completely abandoned right now. Renee Giracarli said, it is finished. There won't be any more cards like this. We were heading into Nazi territory, where they had people wear, the Jewish people they wore the yellow star on their arm, and we can see the same thing was starting to happen once again. Now, here in the United States, we see that the U.S. has added about 321,000 jobs in November, the most since 2012. Unemployment rate remains at 5.8%. And we have to really look at the numbers and try to understand what is going on here. Part-time jobs, which rose about 77,000, while full-time jobs have declined by 150,000. Participation rate remained flat at 62.8%, essentially the lowest print since 1978, driven by a 69,000 worker increase in people not in the labor force. So we can see right now there are less people in the labor force, and we can see right now that full-time jobs have declined and part-time jobs are increasing. The ratio of civilian employment to the total population, which plunged during the onset of the recession, has still barely budged higher. Young people, those aged 16 to 24, are finally entering the workforce in droves. Sadly, that is not the case once again, with the employed ranks of Americans in that age group down by 169,000 in the past month. And we've said this over and over again. Those youths who are trying to find work, those coming out of college, those coming out of high school, they're having a very difficult time, especially college graduates. They cannot find work in their major. They're taking part-time work. Actually, I know a couple of people who have graduated college. They are still looking for work, and yes, they do have student loans, and they're saying it is very, very difficult to find jobs in their majors. So they have taken part-time jobs, and they're working per hour at this time. But again, they can't leave their parents' home. They have student loans coming up, and it is very difficult to survive. But where are all these jobs that they're talking about that we're recovering? Well, here's the breakdown. Professional services, excluding temp help, was about 63,000, of which administrative assistants, 12,000, bookkeepers, about 16,000. Retail trade, about 50,000. Of course, we would see a increase in this because we're coming up to the holiday season. And again, as we know, once the holiday season is over, come the end of January, they're going to let all those workers disappear, and there will be no jobs once again, and people will be struggling because they will have no work. Leisure and hospitality, 38,000, of which waiters and bartenders were about 26,000. Manufacturing was about 28,000, and temp help was almost the same as manufacturing at 22,000 jobs. So we can see right now that is the breakdown. We're not seeing many corporations hire here. They are laying off at this point. And again, this is why we are seeing the retail sales completely falling. We have an unemployment rate of 5.8%. But prior years, the unemployment rate was higher and we had better sales. So somebody is manipulating the numbers, and we know who that somebody is. It's the U.S. government and central bankers. Now, in the real world, where people regularly eat food, we see inflation, and if we really calculate it out, we see that inflation is around 10%. And also, if we go to John Williams, his website, Shadow Stats, we can see that inflation is around this area. When we subtract a realistic estimate of inflation, once we get even close to 10%, suddenly a negative 11% on Black Friday becomes negative 20%. Black Friday shopping in the U.S. this year plummeted by 20% or more. In the realm of economics, a year-over-year change of the magnitude is not a plunge, it is a collapse. For much of the U.S. retail sector, retailers are now selling half as many goods as they were selling before the crash of '08. U.S. households could save about $1,100 from falling gas prices. American households had an additional $1,100 apiece put into their pockets just in time to go shopping. But guess what? Even with the extra cash, and this is on average, there was a nominal plunge in spending of 11%. So what they were trying to do is not working. And we can see right now a collapse of 20% plus is in real dollars, because we have to add in inflation to all of this. How do we know that the U.S. consumer economy is dead? Because the U.S. consumer is dead. This is why we see sales falling. It is not going to get better at the end of this year, like all these corporate media economic figures are telling us that, oh yes, what people are doing, they didn't want to rush out for the sales. They're going to spread it along the whole holiday season, and you'll see this is part of the recovery. This is how it works. No, a recovery is when people feel comfortable, when people say, I have a secure job, I'm making a great living, I can go out and spend money because I'm not worried or nervous. We are not seeing that. And once again, when we come closer to that holiday season, you can go out and look at the people's trash and you can see, hey, listen, people don't have the trash that like they used to. It all fit into one can. There's no boxes. There's nothing. I guess Christmas season was a complete bust. And we can also see this by when February, March hits, when we see a huge amount of store closures. We saw this back in 2013, where they were telling us the holiday season was going to be fantastic, and then we had cold weather in January, and we had huge numbers of stores announcing they were closing. We are going to see the same thing once again. Now, there's many retailers that are closing right now. Delilah's, which is a company that produces or sells clothes to teenagers. Well, Delilah said Friday that it plans to liquidate its stores and file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company has struggled with weak sales for years and has not reported an annual profit since the recession. So they have been doing poorly this entire time. Many stores are doing the same thing. They are not making the sales. They are hoping that this holiday season is going to really help them. And we already see stores that are not going to make it. Sears, JCPenney, Radio Shack. Believe me, there's going to be many more than this. And those other stores that did make it but didn't reach their sales goals, you will see those stores starting to close a lot of the stores, and you're going to see a lot of plazas become empty. Now we see that factory orders now have tumbled. This is the most since January. U.S. factory orders tumbled about 0.7% in October, missing a zero expectation for the third month in a row. So we can see right now that things are still not going well, and factory orders are down. Now, to help the real estate market, it looks like the Fed is out there, and they are buying mortgage bonds. The Federal Reserve bought about $4 billion of agency mortgage-backed securities in the week from November 27th to December 3rd. That is a short period of time of $4 billion purchases. Last week, they bought about $6 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, and this is in a move to help the housing market. And we can see right now, if the housing market was recovering, why are they still purchasing these mortgage-backed securities? The reason for it is because the housing market is not recovering. It's an illusion, and they have to keep the illusion alive. Now, out in Venezuela, the Central Bank of Venezuela is adding diamonds, gold, and other precious stones and metals to its foreign reserves, which have been falling for the last 11 years. The bank said in a statement issued Thursday it intends to use a broader range of assets to increase international reserves. It will also include freely convertible foreign currencies. Venezuela may also use Chinese loans in yuan to bolster its international reserves. And of course, we have to remember Venezuela is part of the BRIC nations. Now, we understand that the United States was once the largest economy in the world. It is no longer the largest economy, and it looks like now China has overtaken the country, and this is coming from the International Monetary Fund. China now sits atop the world's economic perch, according to the IMF, which released the latest numbers for the world economies by measuring purchasing power parity. By the end of 2014, China's economic output will amount to about 17.6 trillion, and the United States is in second place with 17.4 trillion. The U.S. was the world's largest economy since 1872 when it overtook Britain, and now we see the opposite is happening, and this happens in cycles. The IMF projected in early October that China's economy will be 20% bigger than that of the U.S. by 2019. And why do you think the United States is trying to overthrow the government of China at this point with the umbrella revolution? Because they realize the BRIC system goes live in January. They do not want this to happen, but at this point in time, I don't believe they can stop them. Now, in South Africa, it looks like President Jacob Zuma on Friday said the African country owes its membership of BRICS to the Chinese effort. South Africa will establish an African regional center for the newly formed $100 billion BRIC bank. And we can see right now that there are many other nations joining the BRICS. And once it goes live in 2015, we're going to see a lot of nations start to enter the BRIC system. And we can see the private Western Central Bank bankers are not really happy with this whatsoever. Now, out in Russia, we understand there are sanctions on certain individuals and certain banks and companies inside Russia. We also understand that the U.S. government, the central bankers, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab nations are lowering the oil prices, and it's part of different agendas. One of it is to hit Russia and hit it really hard. And we're starting to see that something's going on with the central bank in Russia. Now, the central bank in Russia is still privately owned, but the government supposedly is controlling it at this point. And now there's an investigation because it seems like maybe the private Western central bankers kind of infiltrated the central bank in Russia. A senior member of President Putin's party has accused the Bank of Russia of engineering the collapse of the ruble. The bank is now being investigated by state prosecutors as a result. The Russian Parliament's Economic Policy Committee accused the central bank of sabotage, telling local media that it was an institutional enemy of the country. And you have to remember, the private central banks in each one of the countries have no allegiance to the country whatsoever. The only allegiance they have is to themselves. They really don't care about the country. They don't care if they go to war. They don't care as long as they're making their profits and they're in control. So even though you have these central banks in the country, they are there for themselves only. Now, we understand Obama signed some type of executive order instructing the agencies like DHS, like the Border Patrol, not to deport the illegal immigrants. But a report that came out said even before this, it seems like there was an increase in the rate of apprehensions of illegal immigrants at the border. The number of people the Obama administration deported last year plunged, according to data obtained by the Los Angeles Times. The newspaper cites a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement draft report that found for the year ending September 30th, the Obama administration removed about 315,000 people. That's down 14% from the previous year and is the fewest deported by the Obama administration to date. The paper reported further revealed that 213,000 removals of these apprehended at the border while trying to illegally enter the U.S. amounted to 9% decline from the year before. Interior removals experienced the greatest decline. The draft report reveals that just 102,000 people were removed, and of that, 85% were individuals convicted of crimes. So we can see already that they were using this procedure of keeping the illegals here in the country. This is what the corporations wanted, and it seems like there wasn't enough in the country, so they had to really create something where they can make all the illegals legal to work in the corporations, and this way they can bypass that $3,000 penalty. They can put them on the workforce, eventually have them go onto Obamacare, eventually take out student loans, have them get credit cards, eventually have them go into the armed forces. So this is all part of the agenda. Now we understand in Vegas, he signed an executive order. But the thing is, did he sign an executive order? Because when we look at this, and we try to understand what happened, and you go to the whitehouse.gov and you look under executive order, guess what? The executive order directing the Department of Homeland Security to forgive millions of illegal aliens for their past violations of immigration law was not there. The National Archives and Records Administration, responsible for maintaining such filings, said no such executive order was ever signed or filed. And I went to look today. There is no executive order whatsoever. And you can just go to whitehouse.gov and you can find the executive order there, which is not there. You can see the menu option, which will tell you to look, and you'll see all the executive orders under that menu option. The only two documents that have that are on the site come under presidential memoranda. November 21st, 2014, presidential memoranda, creating welcoming communities and fully integrating immigrants and refugees. November 21st, 2014, presidential memorandum, modernizing and streamlining the U.S. immigrant visa system for the 21st century. So he really didn't sign an executive order. And the question is, what is a presidential memorandum? Well, it is a type of executive instrument typically issued by the President of the United States to manage and govern the actions, practices, and policies of the various departments and agencies found under the executive branch of the United States government. And this could be what he created, but he did not create an executive order. It does not exist right now on the site, and nobody at this point can locate it. So did he really sign an executive order? That really is the question. Now, Congress does have the power to defund any federal agency, even an agency funded through fees, the Congressional Research Service determined in a letter released last week. The letter, requested by a Republican lawmaker, addressed an issue raised by the House Appropriations Chairman Hal Rogers, who claimed it is impossible for Republicans to defund Obama's amnesty since the agency in charge of issuing the work permits, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service Office, is almost entirely funded by user fees. The CRS found that Rogers' claim was completely false. In light of Congress's constitutional power over the purse, the Supreme Court has recognized that Congress may also circumscribe agency discretion to allocate resources by putting restrictions in the operative statutes where Congress has done so. An agency is not free simply to disregard statutory responsibilities. Therefore, if a statute were enacted which prohibited appropriated funds from being used for some specified purposes, then the relevant funds would be unavailable to be obligated or expended for those purposes. So right now, what we're saying is that Congress does have the ability to defund the amnesty executive order, which really isn't signed, maybe the memorandums that he signed, but right now they do have the power to do this. So right now it looks like the Congress is putting together a bill, the House of Representatives, and the bill is H.R. 5759, Preventing Executive Overreach on Immigration Act of 2014. And it looks like President Obama, with the advice from his advisors, is going to veto it. So his executive order, which we cannot find, is going to stand. And I don't know why they didn't place this executive order on the website. And this is very confusing of why it wasn't. Okay, now we realize the government would love to control the flow of information. I mean, we see in Ukraine where the U.S. has their fingers in there. They're controlling the government. They're controlling everything about the country, and they're setting up a specific Ministry of Information because they want to control the flow of information. Here in the United States, it's a little bit tougher, and we have alternative media or the new media out there trying to pretty much debunk everything the government is trying to tell us and show that no, these things are not true and this is what's really happening in the world. And we can see they don't like this whatsoever, and they're trying to pass bills, trying to make it like you need to get a license to report the news, that there only can be certain journalists with these licenses that can do anything, and they're trying to push all this through. They're trying to control the internet in certain ways, and again, they don't want the new media out there reporting on anything. They want all the information coming from the corporate-owned news agencies that they can control. They submit the news sources to them. That's what they report. There is no investigation reporting anymore. They don't do it. And we're seeing that there are signs that they're starting to block the alternative media sites. And we can see that they're doing this with throttling the internet. And basically, the U.S. and other governments have contingencies in place to block or obscure online news sources by way of regional internet hubs. The idea is simple. Keep citizens from seeing any alternative reporting or analysis in times of crisis or domestic strife. The number of top alternative news sites have noticed that websites have been offline in certain regions at certain times. Others have noticed and documented the same observation. Online news sites to be blacked out during the next major catastrophic event. Now, we have to remember, every time there is some type of event like Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing, 9/11, the alternative media is out there and they're pointing out all the inconsistencies and why this can't be true. So why are they doing this? Well, when the next major event occurs, where the government wants its official narrative to be the only information allowed to circulate, they will pretty much throttle or block the alternative media. And what are these events going to be? Well, it's going to be a terrorist event, false flag event, and they don't want the alternative media reporting on this. And you have to remember, when the beheading videos first came out with the Islamic State, everyone started pointing out all the inconsistencies, saying this can't be real. And of course, in the UK, they said anyone that looks at these videos is now deemed a terrorist. Anyone that looks at the beheading video, the original one, you are a terrorist. And then they started taking down the beheading videos very, very quickly because they realized they made so many mistakes creating them. And we can see right now, we are headed towards another false flag event. And we can see that, yes, they will be taking down or blocking certain sites. I noticed the other day when I needed internet connection, I stopped in a Starbucks. I couldn't get to my own site. It was blocked. I was completely shocked. And if anyone goes to any of these places, try getting to certain news sites. You will see that they have already started blocking certain sites so people can't go to them. Now, out in Afghanistan, we realize the troops are never coming home. They were never going to leave Afghanistan. We have to understand that Afghanistan has lithium, it has oil, it has copper. The Chinese are there, Russia's there. They grow the poppy fields. They're never leaving there. It's also in a strategic location, and we realize that they're going to ramp up the number of soldiers that are in Afghanistan. And we're seeing this already because the bilateral security agreement was signed with the new president. And of course, the United States government central bankers kind of helped get the new president elected here. And what we're seeing right now is that the Obama administration is continually discussing with allied nations about how many troops NATO countries would be able to contribute to a training mission in Afghanistan. And you know, every time they have a training mission, basically the troops are left there. But because not all NATO nations are able to meet targets for contributing troops to the 12,000 strong training force by January 1st, the United States will keep a larger number of troops in Afghanistan. It's a perfect excuse of why the troops are back in Afghanistan. The evolving plans for the future U.S. military force in Afghanistan follows Obama's recent decision to expand authorities for U.S. troops to protect Afghan soldiers and respond to militant attacks beyond this year. And also we see there are increasing number of attacks inside Afghanistan. Afghanistan is right now in flux. We can see that troops were being removed. Now they're coming back. We see an increase of attacks, so now more troops have to go there. And you can see that we are never leaving the Afghanistan region. Now, China is going to push strategic partnership with Russia. A day after Russian President Vladimir Putin's State of the Nation address, China said it will pursue closer ties with Moscow. China is determined to keep building up the strategic partnership with Russia. We respect the road taken by the Russian nation, including its domestic and foreign policies. We watch the Russian president's statement with great interest. The level of trust and cooperation between our countries is very high, and this is coming from Hua Chunying. Moscow is consciously making a concerted attempt in reducing dollar dependence for Russian trade, including making greater use of settlements in ruble and yuan in its trade with China. Also, Russia, they are moving the oil market away from the U.S. dollar. We're encouraging in every way the use of national currencies, both the ruble and yuan, away from the U.S. dollar in the oil markets, and this is coming from Putin. So we can see the push to de-dollarize is continuing and it's accelerating. Now, out in Ukraine, things went bad to worse right now. Ukraine's reserves plunged 20% in 1 month, below the 10 billion to lowest in a decade. And why did this happen? Well, they had to pay the gas bill to Russia, and it kind of depleted their reserves. And we have to remember the gold reserves, they were stolen. They're missing. They're gone. So their reserves went from 12.6 billion down to $9.9 billion. Ukraine's Poroshenko tells army not to give up the Donetsk airport. The whole of Ukraine will be within reach of the enemy if its armed forces lose control of the international airport in the eastern city of Donetsk to the separatists. This is coming from Poroshenko. I am sure that we are defending there the whole of Ukraine, he said. If we give up the airport, the enemy will advance and take over more cities in Ukraine. And I don't believe this is what the southeastern people really want. If they really wanted this, they could have continued during that period where they were going from city to city and pushing the Ukrainian forces back because they were very weak. They didn't have the weaponry. And they stopped and they said, you know what? We just want our area. We want the southeastern section, and we want peace. And we can see right now, peace is not what they want. The Ukraine government wants the entire country. They want Crimea. This is why that bill was passed in the United States House of Representatives, and this is why we can see we are on our way towards war. Now, Iran is out there, and they are confirming that yes, they did do some bombing in Iraq, and this had nothing to do with the United States. It was coordinated with the Iraqi government, and we did not deal with the United States whatsoever, and we did some bombing in that country. Now, the United States has acknowledged that the Islamic State does have training camps in Libya. Officials said the military has not been directed to strike the Islamic bases in Libya as of yet. They are watching them, making sure that it doesn't spread, and you know what's happening here. They need to get back into these countries. They need to get back into Libya. They need to get back into Lebanon. They need to get into Yemen. And how do you do this? Because the United States central bankers were already in here with NATO, giving the people freedom and democracy, and now the people want their countries back. It makes no sense. How would they get into these countries? The Islamic State, the proxy army. Have them spread out through the Middle East, and we can go back into these countries and reestablish the puppet government. Now, we have to think back. We had a story where the leader of the Islamic State, his wife and children, they were captured by the Lebanese government, and right now the Islamic commander is threatening to kidnap Lebanese women and children, and he is planning to attack Lebanon because, again, we have fighting in Lebanon, and Where does the United States central bankers need to get into? They need to get back into Lebanon. They need to get into Libya. They need to get into Yemen. All these countries they need to go to, they're going to use the Islamic State. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. They're pushing their agenda forward. Now, the U.S. is out there saying that the Western plans to train and equip the rebels in Syria will not start until February. And they're saying that, they don't have things in place and they're not going to start training of these rebels. Well, they really don't have to rush. They have the Islamic State and they're clearing the path for these newly trained rebels. And we can see right now, as time goes on and we go into the new year, things are really going to start to ramp up. And you can see they're pushing war as hard as they possibly can because they need to get it started to cover this complete collapse, because after the holiday season, the economy is not going to look good. Housing is not going to be doing well. Retail is not going to be doing well. Unemployment is manipulated. Inflation is manipulated. GDP is manipulated. And these numbers are going to be separate and apart from what's happening in the real economy. And if you really look around the country today, they are clearing out the 10 cities where people are living because they are homeless. They're in Silicon Valley. They were in the woods in, I forgot what other state, in New Jersey. They were clearing them out. They're going and clearing them out. They don't want the homeless in the cities either. They don't want anyone to understand and realize what is really going on until it's too late. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.